He didn't look like much, just another cook standing behind a greasy counter in a roadside diner that smelled of coffee, bacon, and memories too old to matter. Every morning, 7 days a week, he showed up before sunrise. He wore the same faded white apron, the same scuffed work boots, the same quiet face that carried years like shadows. To the truckers who stopped by, he was just the old guy on the grill. To the waitresses, he was simply cook. He never talked much. Orders came in, food went out, simple as that. But what nobody knew, not the teenagers grabbing late-night burgers, not the regulars sipping black coffee at 5 a.m., not even the manager who signed his paychecks, was that the man behind the sizzling flat top wasn't always just a cook. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we dive into this narrative of silence, service, and the voice that carried men through fire, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, hit the subscribe button so we can keep them alive. Now, let's go back to that diner. His name on the schedule was Frank. No last name given, just Frank. Every shift was the same. He arrived at 4:30 a.m., before the lights came on, carrying nothing but a small duffel bag and a thermos dented from years of use. He moved with a slow rhythm that wasn't clumsy but careful, deliberate. He wiped down the counter, sharpened his knives, and stacked his pans like he'd been doing it for decades. Most of the waitresses never asked him about his past. Why would they? He wasn't the type to answer. He kept his head down. He worked. He went home. That was the cycle. And then one morning, a young soldier walked in. His name was Ethan, 19 years old, fresh out of basic training, dressed in civilian clothes, but still carrying that posture, shoulders back, chin up, like the drill sergeants had hammered it into his bones. He was on his way back to base after a weekend with his parents. The bus had stopped in the small town for 30 minutes, and the diner was the only place open. He sat at the counter, ordered pancakes and coffee, and waited. And that's when it happened. The cook called out to the waitress in a voice that cut through the clatter of dishes and the hum of the neon sign. "Order up, table 4. Ethan froze. It wasn't the words, it was the tone, sharp, commanding, the kind of voice that didn't belong in a diner. It was the kind of voice you heard on a parade field, echoing through training grounds, the kind of voice that had once drilled men into soldiers. Ethan glanced up. The cook was just standing there, wiping grease off the spatula. Nothing about him screamed military, no patches, no haircut, no stance, just an old man in an apron. But that voice. Ethan leaned a little closer, pretending to sip his coffee. He waited until the cook spoke again. "Pancakes, table 2. There it was. Same tone, same cadence. And suddenly, Ethan's heart was racing. Because he had heard that voice before, not from this man, but from men like him, men who had lived long enough, fought hard enough to carry authority in every syllable. Ethan swallowed. He wanted to say something. But how? You don't just ask a cook in a diner if he once commanded soldiers in combat. So he waited. The moment came sooner than expected. Half an hour later, a delivery boy came rushing through the back door, arms full of boxes stacked too high. He slipped on the wet floor and crashed to the ground, boxes scattering everywhere. Everyone gasped, everyone except Frank. The old cook's reaction was instant, automatic. "Secure that corner. Get the rest upright. Move, move, move." The words thundered out of his mouth like gunfire. Not panicked, not loud for the sake of loud. Controlled, commanding, undeniable. The boy scrambled to his feet. The waitresses froze mid-step. Even the customers turned in their seats. And Ethan knew. That wasn't a cook speaking. That was a leader, a warrior, a man who once gave orders that meant the difference between life and death. When the chaos settled, Ethan couldn't hold back anymore. He stood, walked up to the counter and said quietly, "Sir, were you ever in the service?" The cook's hands paused mid-motion. For the first time all morning, his eyes lifted. They were gray, steady, and sharper than Ethan expected. "Why do you ask?" Frank said, voice low. "Because of the way you spoke just now," Ethan answered. "That wasn't a diner order. That was a command, military command." For a long moment the cook didn't respond. The diner seemed to hush around them. The clatter faded, the hum softened. Finally Frank said, "Eat your pancakes, son. They're getting cold." And just like that, he turned back to the grill. Ethan sat down again, but his mind was spinning. He watched every move the cook made, the way he kept his station spotless, the way he placed utensils exactly where they belonged, the way he moved with purpose, never wasted a step. It was discipline, muscle memory, training. The same training Ethan was still struggling to master at the start of his career. And suddenly he realized this man wasn't hiding. He was just living quietly. But quiet didn't erase history. After finishing his pancakes, Ethan walked toward the register. The cook was cleaning the grill. For a split second, his sleeve rolled back. That's when Ethan saw it. A scar. Long, jagged, faded by years, but unmistakable. The kind that didn't come from an accident in a kitchen. It was a combat scar. And just above it, ink. Almost invisible now, blurred with age, but Ethan knew the shape. It was a unit insignia, one he'd seen in training manuals, the symbol of an elite force. His breath caught. This man wasn't just a veteran, he was a legend hiding in plain sight. Ethan stepped closer. His voice trembled with respect. "Sir, that insignia, that's from recon, isn't it?" The cook froze. His shoulders stiffened just slightly. He pulled his sleeve back down, turned slowly, and met Ethan's gaze. "Some things," he said quietly, "aren't meant to be talked about." Ethan nodded quickly. "I understand. I didn't mean to." The cook raised a hand, not harshly, just enough to silence him. "Finish your coffee, son, then get back on your bus. You've got your own battles ahead." And with that, he turned away again. But Ethan couldn't. He couldn't just leave it there. The next day, Ethan came back. He skipped breakfast at the base, took a bus, walked the mile to the diner. When he stepped inside, the cook was there, just like always. This time, Ethan didn't order pancakes. He just sat at the counter, waiting. Finally, after an hour of silence, the cook spoke without looking at him. "You're persistent." "Yes, sir," Ethan said. "Why?" "Because men like you don't just disappear. And I think I need to learn from you." The cook exhaled slowly. For a moment, Ethan thought he would be dismissed again, but instead Frank turned, wiped his hands on his apron, and leaned on the counter. "You think you want to know," he said, "but you don't. You think you're ready, but you're not." Ethan swallowed. "Then teach me." Over the next weeks, Ethan kept coming back. Not every day, not in uniform, just quietly on weekends when he had leave. He'd sit at the counter. The cook never told war stories, never boasted. Instead, he taught in silence. How to watch a room without staring, how to move without wasting energy, how to listen more than you speak. Sometimes he'd give Ethan a single sentence that felt like it carried decades. Discipline isn't loud. Respect is earned in silence. Real strength doesn't advertise. It wasn't instruction like at the base. It was something else, something deeper, and Ethan absorbed every word. One evening, just before closing, the diner was half empty. A group of rowdy men came in, loud, drunk, careless. They started heckling the waitress, making a scene. Ethan tensed, ready to stand up, but before he could, Frank stepped out from behind the counter. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just spoke. "Gentlemen, it's time you left." The tone froze them mid-laugh, because that voice, that undeniable authority, wasn't a cook's voice. It was the voice of a man who once led soldiers through chaos, and the men left. No argument, no fight, just silence. Ethan sat there in awe. Weeks later, Ethan's deployment orders came. He stopped by the diner one last time before leaving. The cook handed him a simple envelope. Inside was a coin, heavy, worn, bearing the insignia Ethan had glimpsed under his sleeve. On the back, just 3 words. Still here. Always. Ethan looked up, his throat tight. Sir, thank you. Frank nodded once. Go earn it, son, and when your time comes, carry it quietly. Ethan saluted him, not the sharp military salute of the parade ground, but a quiet gesture of respect between 2 men. The cook didn't return it. He just turned back to the grill, apron tied, spatula in hand. And that's how Ethan left him, just a cook in a diner, flipping eggs, hiding a past that could never truly be hidden. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Frank? Someone ordinary on the outside, but carrying a history deeper than you could imagine? If you have, share their story in the comments. Say their name. Honor them in the silence they kept. And if this story touched you, subscribe to the Human Stories so we can keep these voices alive. Because the most powerful legacies are not written in books or shouted in crowds. They live quietly, sometimes behind a grill in a roadside diner, until someone listens closely enough to hear the voice that never forgot how to lead.